If you have been in KidMen for any length of time, you know that there's a stereotype that kids ministry is for women. Today, Curt Nelson and I are here to tell you that that is not true. Kids need to see men of every generation serving in the church, and there are plenty of ways for them to do that. And that's what we're talking about in today's episode.
Hey there, and welcome to the KidzMatter podcast, your go-to resource for all things children's ministry. Each week, we bring you fresh ideas, inspiring stories, and practical insights to help you lead, love, and serve kids like never before. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned pro, we're glad you're here. Let's get started.
I'm Hannah Augustine, and this is a topic that I'm passionate about. It is time to change the stereotypes and make space for men to serve in KidMen. This is going to be a great conversation, so you're going to want to grab a notebook and get ready for practical ideas about getting the men in your church involved. Now, Vacation Bible School season is almost here, and our partners at Oriental Trading are ready to help you pull it all together. No matter which direction your VBS is going this year, Oriental Trading has the supplies that support today's most popular VBS themes, along with fresh new themes that kids are loving right now. From Christ-centered crafts and activities to decor, games, and themed add-ons, you'll find dozens of coordinating options designed to work seamlessly with your curriculum. And here's a bonus just for our podcast listeners. You can use promo code KidzMatter26 to get free shipping on orders of $25 or more, plus $10 off any $100 order. That's more ministry impact for your budget, which we know is important. So head over to orientaltrading.com/faith, fill up your cart, and don't forget that code KidzMatter26. Get ready for your best VBS yet with faith-filled fun kids will remember long after the final day. Huge thanks to Oriental Trading for supporting KidzMatter and equipping kids ministries everywhere. If you've not checked out their site, let me tell you, they have a lot of great stuff on there. Now, I'm joined today by Curt Nelson, the creator of Spyence curriculum, where gospel-centered systematic theology collides in the best way with laughter, science experiments, spy-themed storytelling, and the occasional evil robot trying to ruin everybody's day. Now, with 11 years of experience as a children's pastor and a background in physics, which is pretty cool, Curt has a knack for taking big, adult-sounding truths and making them clear and so fun that even the fifth grade boys stay engaged. Now, Curt, when we were planning out a theme for today's episode, you actually recommended talking about KidMen and the importance of men serving in kids ministry. Why is this something that you're passionate about? And as a man, how did you first get involved with serving in KidMen?
Thanks, Hannah. I started as a youth pastor working with middle school and high school kids, which is kind of a stereotypical guy role, and kind of as a throwaway, one of my responsibilities was running VBS. And I thought, just get through this week. You can survive it, Curt. But much to my surprise, I had so much fun in VBS with the elementary school kids that I was like, wait, this is where I want to be. And then you start reading the statistics about how many boys don't have a dad in the home, or do have a dad in the home, but not one who is spiritually engaged. And you realize what a need there is for kids to see godly men excited to come to church, excited to worship, excited to study God's word. Not there because they lost a bet, but because they're excited to be in children's ministry. And I don't know how much of this I had thought through logically at that point, but I know that when I started at Northwest Hills Community Church, our kids' church team had one male volunteer out of 12 was our ratio. And it was obvious we needed to recruit some guys. And so I started actively recruiting guys, and our volunteer team eventually went from 1 man out of 12 to 10 men out of 12. So yeah,
Amazing.
We overcorrected like crazy. So our kids' church team, I like to call it, it turned into a boy band. So since then, we've come back into balance, but it showed me you absolutely can get men working in children's ministry if you're intentional about it. And maybe you can share a little bit about, you don't have to be a guy children's ministry leader to do that.
That is absolutely true. Before I do that, I want to hear, which boy band would your team be? Like One Direction, Boys to Men, Jonas Brothers. What are we looking at?
Oh my goodness. I really want to be Steve Taylor and some band. That's not a boy band, but
We'll take it.
I think Steve Taylor is amazing, and if there's anybody I could dance as well as, Steve Taylor is setting the bar pretty low.
That is fair. That is fair.
I can joke about that.
I love it. Well, I absolutely agree with you that you don't have to be a man to invite men to serve. Now, I think there's advantages. Obviously, when you are a man serving in children's ministry, you're setting the bar, you're able to speak from personal experience. But obviously, I was a female in children's ministry for a long time. And when I moved back, I had a couple different roles at my church in Florida. And when I moved back to the elementary director role at our broadcast campus, we had anywhere between maybe 200, 275. Obviously, post-COVID, those numbers were a little lower. So 175 to 250 on a weekend over 3 or 4 services. So when I came back, we were predominantly female. Obviously, a couple of maybe high school, middle school boys, especially in the tech booth. So we had a lot of them serving in the tech booth. And my campus pastor came to me and he said, I want you to get more men on this team because, that's what we need. And so it was kind of the challenge of, okay, can I do it? I'm going to get these guys in here. And it really did just start with those invitations, and we'll talk about how to do that, but really just inviting and personally casting the vision. And what's incredible is once you get a man in your ministry, a full grown man, we love the middle schoolers, but a grown up man, it starts to spread, and all of a sudden you see this ripple effect. Okay, I've got one and now they're multiplying, and it changes the culture. How would you say, Curt, that we would effectively invite men, as a man from that perspective, but also just what you've seen work? How do we invite men to serve in KidMen?
Yeah, I think the most important tip is to be specific. So don't
Mm,
just stand on stage and say, we need volunteers, because everybody hears that and assumes you mean someone more qualified, more
right.
available, more into glue sticks and glitter.
Yes.
So be, yeah, be specific. Go to a specific man and tell him a specific reason you think he would be good for a specific need and invite him to a specific role. So like, Mike, we have a 4th grade boy in our ministry who really needs a godly man in his life. And I think you would be so good at building that kind of relationship. Would you consider serving in the 4th grade class? I'm picturing you serving as a classroom helper, supporting whatever the teacher is doing. And it would just be so great if this one 4th grade boy saw you excited to play the games and you're excited to sing the worship songs and answer questions and do the hands-on activities. That kind of invitation is great because now the guy you're asking can picture exactly what he would be doing and how it would help him meet a spiritual need instead of like having this vague, terrifying volunteer abyss that he can't picture at all. And I also would say recruit in categories. So obviously, dads with kids in the ministry are obvious candidates and the first category that I thought of. But don't stop there. I actually had better luck inviting dads whose kids had aged out of the elementary program and now had gone on to middle school and high school and were kind of doing their own thing. And all of a sudden, the dads had time and they were happy to be in there with the littler kids. And it was like sentimental and all that. And like you mentioned, middle school kids, but high school guys, college guys, young adult men. And then I love to remind people that don't forget about grandpas because they've got time, wisdom. They've got the patience to listen to a kid tell a 10-minute story that should have taken 45 seconds. My last tip in this area is recruit in pairs or groups. Like if you think about a dad who might be good, ask the dad and his teenage son to serve together. Or look around and find a couple guys who are like college buddies. They're hanging out, they're laughing. Ask them both at the same time to serve with you. It's much easier to say yes when you're not saying yes alone, right? So I like to remind people, men are pack animals. Use that, ask in groups, and you can get more yeses, and each ask will result in 2 or 3 great volunteers.
It's so good. I love the pack animals. It's true, right? That they will feel supported when they're in this together. And that's true for both genders, right? That women are going to keep serving if they feel more connected. Men are going to start serving maybe if they feel more connected. What you shared about having that tangible conversation, that it's not going to be a volunteer abyss, well said. I think a lot of times we expect people to know what we're talking about, and they don't. They don't have a concept of what it is to serve in children's ministry. And when we can break that down, it's less intimidating. Being able to say, oh, hey, Joe, Steve already serves on Sunday at 9:30. Why don't you want to connect with him? He'd love to tell you about what he does. And I found some of the men that would serve, I think, can become your champions to get other men involved. And like you said, dads are a great place to start. They already know the importance of their role in a child's life. And I think in a world today where many families, parents included, have not been churched. They're not familiar with scripture. And so you have a lot of dads that they're needing to learn and grow. They may not be the right candidate right now, but when you see a dad who is leading his family spiritually, whose kids are plugged in and involved, that is a great place to start. And as you said, when those kids move up, how much more are they maybe willing? Oh man, I miss this age. I miss, that time when they were so hungry to learn and grow. So helping them connect the dots. Absolutely with grandparents. I think of Steve served with us. He was an incredible grandpa whose grandkids were not local. And so he had the opportunity, hey, I'm going to invest in other people's grandkids, right? And then that's a mutually beneficial thing that kids whose grandparents are not local or maybe are no longer in their lives are getting to have that grandparent dynamic. We invited many husbands and wives to serve together, spouses, and that can be a beautiful dynamic because that's strengthening a marriage, right? You get to use your gifts, whether you're leading a table together. Obviously, if they're in a room together, you want to have another adult so that all that's safe and good. So keep that in mind. But if they're all in a big elementary class, maybe she's leading a table here and he's leading one there. And that's going to help boost their confidence and help them feel, okay, we're doing this together and we have that accountability. Now, the downside is if one of them is out, they're probably both out. So you got to be aware when they go on vacation, you lose two people. But it is worth that because seeing them and watching their marriage grow and develop because they're serving is a beautiful dynamic.
I loved what you said about how you may have a volunteer who doesn't have like a deep Bible knowledge. Maybe they didn't grow up in a Christian family, but they do love God. But you think it'd be great if they had a chance to really study and go through some theology, go through doctrine, go through the Bible. And I always think that's a great person to pick to teach a class because you learn most when you're teaching, right? Maybe the 5th grade level or 3rd grade level doctrine, you go through that for a year, and that's a great learning experience for someone who didn't grow up in Sunday school. So don't disqualify people just because they haven't been in the church for years and years and have this deep knowledge. They may be the perfect person, and it's kind of a training program for them as well to teach in children's ministry.
I would love to hear, Curt, especially from a guy's perspective. What would you say is the best way to frame an invitation to serve so that guys are actually interested?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that they know that you picked them specifically for a reason, not just because you were desperate, even if you were desperate. Let me give you an example. Like I write the Spyence systematic theology curriculum, which has videos where a team of superheroes has to thwart an evil robot's plan each week. And in the process, one of the superheroes learns a Bible truth that leads right into the lesson. So it's basically theology with explosions and in a sanctified way. So you can go up to a guy in your church and say, hey, we're starting this new curriculum with superheroes, and that's not really my thing, but you like superhero movies, don't you? I think you and the kids would really bond over these videos and these lessons. Would you help in kids' church for the next 6 weeks? He's going to say yes because you just told him his nerdy fanboy hobby is a spiritual gift. And take it from a nerdy fanboy, you can't turn down that invite. Or here's another example from the Spyence curriculum. Each week during small group time, the volunteers help the kids do a hands-on science experiment at the table that reinforces the lesson. So you could go up to a guy in your church and say, hey, we're starting this new curriculum that has a science experiment each week. And when it comes to science experiments, I have no idea what I'm doing. But you like hands-on science stuff, don't you? Would you help in kids' church for the next 6 weeks? Now you've made him feel like a genius and recruited him. It's so efficient.
That's amazing. I know I've heard of at least one church, and I won't give a name to it because I would give credit to the wrong person, but a couple of different people that have brought parents in almost like a parents' day and being able to say, hey, I know that you're a construction worker. We're in a series on Nehemiah. Would you come in and talk about what you do? And that is a great way to honor them, right? But also to help pull them in, exactly like you're saying. Let's tie in what you're passionate about to what we're doing. And when they get that taste for, oh my goodness, this is an incredible ministry. It's an incredible way to connect with kids. I think that's going to help them stay in the long term. So don't be afraid to tie things in, whether it's something that seems secular, like loving superhero movies or building in construction. It's absolutely sacred. It's absolutely possible to help kids connect the dots because some of your kids will grow up and be pastors and missionaries and maybe go to seminary, but a lot of them are going to go into the secular world. And I think it's important that we stop making these distinctions, right, between well, this is a role for Jesus, and this is working in the world. They're both honoring the Lord when we're doing it for the Lord, right? Colossians chapter 3. So find those ways to bring people in who have all these interests. And again, you're going to help these boys and girls connect with someone who shares a passion. That's so good. You mentioned high schoolers, same thing, right? Where we're helping them develop gifts and skills and connect with theology. And kids love high schoolers. They absolutely love,
Yes.
especially those high school boys. We had a young man named JJ, and he was above and beyond, just loved the kids. He had told me when I did my ministry conversation with him, I said, tell me about your time with the Lord. He's tried to spend about an hour every day in the Bible. He was 15. I thought, who is this kid? And he started serving. He's still, I believe, faithfully serving, now graduated high school, just incredible young man. And the kids adored him. They all wanted to be at JJ's table. He would have 2 tables with 16 kids, and they just adored him. So don't underestimate these different ages. And you're going to share about this a little bit. What are some great guy opportunities, keeping in mind different giftings, personalities? What are some ways to help men engage in the children's ministry?
Yeah, I love what you said that because a lot of times people say, well, yeah, how can a young man, like, what's an easy role for him to start out in? And I always stop them and say, okay, well, just because he's young doesn't mean he might not be able to teach the large group lesson and just nail it. And I've had some experience with that where we've had like a high school guys and girls who come in and they're like ready to teach the large group, and you set them free to do that. And it's like amazing. So don't rule them out for any like what you consider bigger roles just because they're young. But in general, like easy places for a guy to start who maybe doesn't have that much confidence would include help lead games. That's usually right up a guy's alley. Or like you mentioned before, run tech. Just sit with the older boys and model for them how to engage in the worship and teaching. I mean, that's almost my favorite one because it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful and so helpful to the lead teacher. Like as a lead teacher, I love the guys, the older guys who sit with the boys, the 5th grade boys, and just show them what it means like to be in church and be engaged. And we know boys watch older males to figure out what they're supposed to do. If the adult volunteers in the room look bored, and if they're standing in the back and they're on their phones, then the elementary school boys learn that participating in kids' church is not cool. But if the men in the room are engaged and participating, then the boys will follow. So it's really important to train your adult guy volunteers to sit with the kids, to do all the hand motions when you're singing songs, like raise their hands, answer questions. I think a lot of adult volunteers think, oh no, we're supposed to let the kids answer questions. I'm like, no, if you got something to say, raise your hand and participate in
So
the
good.
discussion. That'd be so awesome. If they have a little more confidence, you could say, hey, I want you to lead the game. You're in charge of the game. You're not just helping. I want you to lead the game, or I want you to come and lead a small group, or co-lead this small group with this other person until you feel comfortable, or present an object lesson. A lot of times your curriculum will have an idea for an object lesson. You can forward that to the guy and say, hey, can you get this ready and present it? And it's like a 5-minute teaching thing. And then from there, they can work into teaching part of the lesson or work into teaching the whole lesson. So far, we've just mentioned typical classroom roles, but be creative. Like if you have men coming to your ministry, I think they stay longer when you let them teach and lead using their own strengths and personality. For example, at our church, this male volunteer, Steve Amoto, came up to me one day and he said, can I take some kids out behind the church by the creek and throw a football with them during our 15 minutes of welcome time? And my first thought was, wait, behind the church by the creek? I was like, that sounds like an accident report waiting to happen, and when you're in charge, yeah. But I held my tongue and I just thought about it for a second. And I thought, well, I wanted guys serving here. What's more positive male role model-y than throwing a football with kids out by the creek and then coming in to
Come on.
study the Bible together? So I said, okay, sure, be safe. And that became a Sunday morning tradition for a group of kids and this leader, and lives were changed. And I'm happy to report no one ever fell in the creek. So it was a win-win. And
That is a win-win.
yeah, exactly. We had another guy who loved taking apart old radios and microwaves with kids. which at first I thought like, also sounds like, man, that could lead into a really great object lesson, or it could easily lead into a church insurance claim. But the kids loved it, and that volunteer became a legend at our church. So obviously, keep your ministry safe, follow all your
Right.
written policies, but as much as you can, say yes to like healthy, creative, guy-shaped contributions.
That's really important. And you mentioned this in your notes that you had sent me is giving that ownership, giving that freedom and helping them realize, you have say in this. And I want you to be creative. I think that's true for all volunteers, giving them that opportunity to speak into the ministry and to invest in what's happening. Because when there is that ownership and that connection, I'm sure that volunteer that threw the football knew if I'm not there, who's throwing the football. And that may sound small, but it's huge when these kids are looking forward to, I'm going to throw the football with Mr. Steve this week. So I got to be there, so I can spend that time with him because he's going to notice I'm not there. And they're going to notice when he's not there. I truly believe when you can get a man of any age, whether that's teen, college, grandparent, dad, when you can get a man on that platform, his voice is going to have a different perspective. And for young men to see, these first through fifth grade especially, to see a man on the platform serving the Lord and reading from the Bible and understanding what the Bible says is setting a precedent for them. And I'm a firm believer that kids need to see themselves represented in the church, right? They need to see someone like me can do that, because when they don't see that, maybe it's hard for them to picture, well, I could be that as well. So helping kids recognize themselves and don't put adults in a box. We had several different volunteers when I started trying to help recruit volunteers to teach the lesson. I love to teach. So for a long time, we only used video teaching. And so when there was an opportunity to teach, I obviously took it. But we made a shift in our curriculum and we started teaching live every weekend, 3 to 4 services. And so it occurred to me, me and my assistant were not going to be able to teach, 16 lessons a month on top of all the other responsibilities. So we started recruiting and brought in a team. One was a high capacity realtor. She was killing it in her field. We had a bank operator. She was directing at or managing at a Bank of America nearby. We had an interior designer that was wacky and fun and could get out there and teach. And then we had Joe, who was a lawyer, Steve, who was a grandpa, all these different personalities. And they all taught differently. And that was a good thing because it meant that the kids were coming in and hearing a different voice every weekend, and they're hearing different stories and different perspectives and all of these things. And you never would have looked at Joe the lawyer and thought he's going to get up there and teach for kids. If I had kept that door closed for him, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to minister in that way. We've talked about this in the podcast before. Don't say no for people, and don't put someone in a box based off of what you think they're capable of. Open that door. It may not work. If you need to close the door, that's fine. Have an honest conversation, but be willing to open that door to the men in your ministry to have that leadership, whether that's taking apart a microwave, which is awesome, or getting up and teaching a lesson and doing an object science experiment, all those things. That's so great. How can we uplift and encourage the men who serve on our teams? What are some tips for leading them well?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is where a lot of churches win big or lose big. But once a man says yes to volunteering in children's ministry, I think he needs 2 things right away: encouragement and freedom. And if you get these 2 things right, you'll get more and more male volunteers. And if you get these 2 things wrong, forget it. But encouragement is the first one. And I'll say, for the ladies out there listening, when it comes to working with kids, men are way more insecure than you think. And I know this could be shocking because we will confidently attempt home repairs we are clearly not qualified for, but we walk into a children's ministry classroom and suddenly we're unsure of ourselves. But many men assume that women are naturally better with kids and men are terrified of looking stupid or doing it wrong. So when a man does serve in your children's ministry for the first time, tell him he did a great job before the class is even over. Or I guess tell him he's doing a great job before the class is over. Tell him again afterward and tell him specifically what he did well. Build confidence early because confident volunteers keep coming back. Insecure guys will suddenly have a lot going on right now for the next 8 years and disappear. So Yeah, give them encouragement and confidence. And second, give them freedom, like we talked about before. And again, not freedom to break your safety rules or ignore leadership, but freedom to do things in a way that feels natural to them. So if a guy wants to connect with boys by tossing a football, or by taking apart a microwave, or turning a Bible review into an extreme sports challenge, be open-minded. And like I kept telling myself, whenever I felt myself about to say, but we've never done it that way, I would quickly bite my tongue and think about if the idea is actually bad or just unfamiliar. And sometimes unfamiliar is exactly what makes it work so well, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at the outcome. Or, this is a good attitude to have, it might go horribly and it'll be a great story to tell. But to me, that's kind of like, you can sum up children's ministry in a nutshell that way. You're trying a bunch of new things. Some are successful, and some are stories you're just going to laugh about later. I think those are very important. If you have a lot of unnecessary barriers to serving in children's ministry, that can be a problem for guys, but also for gals. So we found it really helpful at our church to get rid of the group training meetings when people sign up to be in children's ministry and just do one-on-one training. And really, one-on-one training, you get the same amount done in 15 minutes that you got in an hour and a half in a group training meeting. And you can show them you can take them to the classroom they're serving in, say, this is the table your kids are going to be at, here's where your science experiment supplies are. It's just very practical to do it. If I could just make one thing crystal clear, I'm not all about replacing women in children's ministry, right? Women have carried children's ministry since the dawn of time, and I'm sure women will continue to be the bedrock of children's ministry, and I'm deeply grateful for that. So this is about inviting men to help carry the load, and so kids can see the full family of God serving together. And I think it's just really important because when boys and girls look around and see regular men serving with joy, opening the Bible, praying, showing up consistently, tells them that following Jesus is not just for women, and it's not just for full-time pastors. It's for everybody, including regular guys. Following Jesus is the best life possible, no matter who you are. So I'll just encourage you at home or in the car, wherever you are, pick one guy to ask this week. Identify a very specific reason you're asking them to volunteer in children's ministry and a very specific role you want them to fill, and then actually go ask them. Don't just think about it on the drive home and then forget about it. And if someone's thinking, man, I wish I had a curriculum that makes all this easier, that's a big part of why I created Spyence, right? It's built to help leaders teach kids systematic theology in a way that's engaging, hands-on, genuinely easy to invite guys into. And while recruiting, you can mention that the Shark Rat Super Sisters have to stop an evil robot from stealing secret plans from the secret plans computer room, because that's true. And it's also very fun to say when you're recruiting.
There's so many great points in what you just shared. I think speaking to the insecurity, find ways, if your pastor or your campus pastor can come around and visit, our campus pastor would come by occasionally and walk in and just say hey to the guy serving. Have that opportunity for them to be honored by another man, right? And so when maybe he could write a card to them on their first Sunday. What does that look like to have someone invest and just say thank you, even from a leadership role? Think the insecurity thing. My husband, God bless him, when we were dating, he got recruited and onboarded to serve in our children's ministry. So he only visited, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. But he came and would serve. And his first visit, he wasn't yet through our whole process. So he wasn't allowed to lead a table or really interact with the kids. So I was giving him busy work. We had just met. We had dated online and had met a week before. And now here he is serving with me in the classroom. So he was a trooper. And he comes in, and I'm sure he felt like he was under the microscope because all my volunteers are like, who is this guy? Is this the guy you're dating? So he's at the back of the room, and it was a glow party because it was New Year's. It was the day before New Year's Eve. It was right after Christmas. And I told him, I said, can you put together all these glow sticks, because we need them put together and we'll pass them out to the kids. I was taking care of something. I wasn't in the room. And I come back in. And he tells me later, he said, you left me and the kids saw the glow sticks and they all surrounded me. And he said, I wasn't supposed to talk to them, so I didn't know what to do. And one of my other volunteers happened to turn around and he was like, help me. And she came over. She's, get away from the glow sticks, leave him alone. And after that, he would get dragged into one week. My boss was like, I need you to teach the 4-year-old room. So I got a picture of him holding up pictures and teaching the lesson because the volunteer in the room didn't know the lesson. So he's having to kind of pull it out of his head and make it up, and just all those things. He is so great with kids, and I see him with my cousin's kids, and yet he says to me, well, I'm not good with kids. And I say, babe, you are great with kids. I've seen you. Like, Joanna and Griffin love you. Juniper was a baby and she was doing great with you. And he's just like, I'm not good with it. And that's from someone who is affirming him and telling him he's doing great. So absolutely, you cannot over affirm. You need to be affirming and speaking, not even generically, but specifically, right? I loved the way you threw that football. I loved the way you spoke encouragement over that boy. Be specific, help them know I'm making a positive impact. And then ladies who are listening, have some boundaries around how you communicate with the men on your team. Just be wise. You don't have to make it weird, but know their boundaries. I have friends whose husbands don't text with females. They only text in a group chat with their wife involved. What is the appropriate way for me to relate to this gentleman, this teenager, whoever it is? You may want to create a coach or someone on your team who will care for the guys on your team and can give them a call and chat with them. You don't maybe want to get as involved as a guy on your team could really invest and be praying with them for things. So look for ways to make sure that they're connecting with the other guys, and whether that's someone on your team that's kind of coaching them and caring for them, or whether you're bringing in an outsider who says, hey, I don't want to work with kids, but I'm happy to invest in the men who are working with kids. So get creative with that. Make sure you're able to help them connect with the other guys on your team, because that's going to help them last longer.
Yeah,
Well, Curt,
that's really interesting because as a male children's pastor, you're always very careful about how you're communicating with the female volunteers. I hadn't thought about it. It goes the other way too. So yeah, that's a very good point to bring up.
and every church has a different policy. In today's world, we want to operate out of wisdom. So talk with your pastor. Hey, what are our boundaries as a church? If you don't have those, maybe this is a good chance to say, hey, let's figure out, do we have policies, or is it just kind of a rule of thumb? But just be wise in how you interact with anybody of the opposite gender is always just a great thing to do. Don't let that make you afraid of thinking, well, I can't relate to men, or I can't care for them well. Don't let that be an obstacle. Find someone who can. I would imagine that your pastor or, a deacon, an elder would be more than willing to help care for these men if they're willing to serve, because that's a win for the whole church, right? Is seeing men involved in the ministry, and that's a win-win across the board. Well, Curt, we are so thankful for all that you do in the KidMen world, for your history serving in the church, now still serving. You told me you're now serving in the ministry that you were once leading, since you're overseeing Spyence full-time, which is awesome. And I'm right there with you. I've got a passion for systematic theology. I love that you and your team are helping make it achievable. I think sometimes we put kids on this level that they can't understand, and they absolutely can. And not only can they need to, because they need to understand the foundations of, what God has done in the past and what he is doing now.
So we have so many chronological through the Bible curriculum that are just amazing and
Right.
fantastic. But I love to also alternate at my church with then a year of kind of taking all those doctrines you learn from that year-long story and breaking out the doctrines and giving kids the vocabulary that you hear in church all the time but might be kind of foreign to kids. Each a week in Spyence, they learn a secret theology code word, which is basically just a theology term. And I took my systematic theology textbook from seminary and divided it into 52 lessons and then rewrote them at kids level and picked out a term for each week that they learn. And so it's really cool that kids use these vocabulary words and their parents are like, I didn't know you knew what sanctification was or something like that. It's so great because if once a month they go into the service and listen to the pastor preach with their parents, they understand these terms and it's not just going over their heads. So I think it's so cool. But like you said, kids can really understand deep truths. And they're at that age where they're really trying to figure out what the Bible is all about, what it means in their life. They're curious. It's like the best time to teach systematic theology, I think.
I agree. And you're whetting that appetite for the deeper things of God and saying, hey, there is so much richness. There's so much that God has done. My favorite thing is to learn those little nuggets of, did you know? And helping our kids have that experience because it's going to make them hungry to study on their own. And you never know what's
Mm.
sparking in their minds and hearts for the future. So if you want to check out Spyence, you can visit spyence.com. That's SPYENCE.com. And you can check out the curriculum, free sample lessons, and see whether it's going to be a good fit for your ministry. And like Curt said, maybe you rotate. We have a lot of curriculums that we love. So maybe you can rotate Spyence in and get some of those incredible principles and just have fun with that in your ministry with all the exciting science opportunities. Kids love science. We did a couple of afternoon science themed events. The kids loved it. Oh my word, the experiments, they were like, ah! So get into it, find ways to incorporate the science and the systematic theology because that's going to be a huge win. As a
Right. The
reminder,
former
you can
physics
use
teacher. I love to hear you saying that. That's awesome.
it's true.
Sorry
Listen, they
to
love the
cut you off.
science, and it is a great way to tie it in. And as a reminder, you can use the promo code KidsMatter26 to get free shipping on orders of $25 or more, plus $10 off any $100 order at orientaltrading.com/faith. Curt, I would love if you would just say a short prayer as we wrap up.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the mission you've given us to disciple the next generation and point them to you. Help us to recruit the right people and put them in the right roles and get out of the way when you start doing awesome things. Lord, we love you. Amen.
Amen. That's right. Recruit the people and get out of the way. Ephesians 4:11-13, right? We're equipping the saints. So thank you, Curt, for being here. Don't forget, you can check out Spyence at spyence.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this episode with someone who needs to recruit some men for their ministry. And we will see you next time.